This trial is the first time in history, anywhere in the world, that the courts of one country, Senegal, are going to prosecute the former leader of another country, Chad, for alleged human rights crimes. It's the first time that the African Union has established a court. It's the first time in Africa, anywhere, that the courts of one country try crimes committed in another country. And all of this is happening because of 25 years of mobilization by Hissène Habré's victims, who never gave up, who were able to surmount obstacle after obstacle, and who have shown by their tenacity and their perseverance that it's possible for simple people, handicapped people, widows, orphans, to actually mobilize to bring a dictator to justice. And I think that that has the power to capture the imagination of victims, of human rights organizations, of people seeking justice around the world. The victims in the Hissène Habré case were inspired by what the victims of the Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet had done. And already the campaign of Hissène Habré's victims is inspiring other people around Africa who are saying, well, we can do this too. They may be in Zimbabwe, they may be in Gambia, they may be in Ethiopia, they're looking at this case and thinking, you know something, we can do that. The most important part is yet to come, which is going to be the trial itself. And at that trial, what we want to see, first of all, is that the victim's voice is seen and heard, and it will be. In that courtroom, the victims, who have been the architects and the protagonists of this case, are going to be there looking Hissène Habré in the face if he shows up, and asking, why was I thrown in prison? Why was my family killed? The Chadian lawyers who have accompanied the victims for the last decade, people like Jacqueline Mudena, who almost paid with her life her engagement with the victims, is going to be the lawyer for the victims, asking that the court pose questions to Hissène Habré. What we want to see is that the best evidence is presented, that the verdict is based on accepted facts, and that in a larger sense the trial shows that it's possible for victims to bring a dictator to justice, and that an African court can provide justice for crimes committed against African victims. Whether or not Hissène Habré comes to court, whether or not he answers questions, this trial is going to go forward. And I think that if Habré doesn't speak, people are going to draw the conclusions. Obviously, the prosecutor still has to prove his case. It's not the burden of Hissène Habré to disprove the charges. It's the burden of the prosecutor and the victims to prove the charges. But I think that it's also, if Habré does not participate, people are also going to look and compare the courage of his victims, who in a country where justice is not the norm, have fought for 25 years to get to court, and the cowardice of somebody who's afraid to look them in the eye, who's afraid to engage in a debate with them. You know, when we began this case, when we started working with the victims over 15 years ago, one of the victims said to Human Rights Watch, "Since when has justice come all the way to Chad?" And I think they have brought justice to Chad, and they've brought it to the Senegal, and they've brought it to an African tribunal. And you know, this is a case that has a much, in a sense, greater impact than a case that is brought by a prosecutor in The Hague who comes down, decides, you know, a prosecutorial strategy, you know, based on a limited case. Here it's the victims who have written the story of this case, who have been really truly the architects, who have said, no, you have to take into account the crimes committed against this ethnic group and that ethnic group, against the North and the South. And so this is a story that is being written by the victims. And as Hissène Habré tries to make himself out to be the victim, he has in front of him real victims, people who were tortured, people who spent years in jail, people who lost loved ones, and who have stood up and demanded justice. You know, a lot of people in the current Chadian government served under Hissène Habré, including President Idriss Déby, who was Hissène Habré's military chief during one of the particularly bloody periods of Habré's repression. And so it's Hissène Habré on trial here. I mean, we'd like to see the truth come out, but this trial is a trial of Hissène Habré, and we're expecting that the government of Chad will collaborate. Trials like this also, you know, give us important historical lessons. Hissène Habré was brought to power by Ronald Reagan and the United States. He was supported by the United States and France throughout his regime, even as he continued to turn the country into a police state and create an archipelago of prisons. And I think it's important that we assign historic responsibility to the United States in particular and to France. At the same time, it's welcome that the Obama administration in particular has stepped up and worked very hard to make this trial happen. And in a sense, it doesn't make up for what happened in the past, but it's a way of getting the United States on the right side of justice.